more talent focused on the purpose. That'd be one. Second is the value of strategic thinking, because we did some really interesting things, particularly when you think we were students who should have been in class spending most of our time, and we spent an enormous amount of time working in this organization. But it made a big difference to think long-term and then to work through people and to do that in a partnership or team-like basis. And basically WGBH in Boston was very much the same sort of an experience. Everybody there was older than I was. Everybody there knew more than I did. But I was, quote unquote, the boss. And so you learn a lot about respect for other people and their talent, and you also learn nobody does anything unless they want to. And they don't do anything well unless they want to. And that if you provide the right opportunities for people to feel inspired and enthusiastic and make that extra commitment, they'll do it.
While you were at WGBH, you started dating a woman who gave you some advice, and she told you about these things called B schools, business schools. And she said to you that Charlie, you ought to go to B school and you ought to go to the Harvard Business School.
Well, she said I should go to the B school. And I said, what is a B school? And she said, business school, for goodness sake. And I said, well, that's nice, but you said the. What does that mean? She said, there's only one. I said, come on, there's got to be more. She said, there's only one you should go to. So that's the Harvard Business School. So I did.
And what was that experience like?
It was
you're talking about transformational.
Yeah, the school likes to say it's a transformational experience. Then almost everybody who's never gone through the school would say that doesn't sound plausible to me. That's a little bit too highfalutin. Anybody who has gone to the school would say, oh yeah, that's exactly what happens. First of all, it's exciting and fun. You're with 80 other students, all of whom are terrified that everybody else must know more than they do, because it seems like the group as a whole knows a lot more than any individual, and that's true. Groups always know more than any individual. The second thing is you learn that you've got an hour and a half to figure out together what is the answer to a problem, but first you got to figure out what is the problem and what's the real problem, not the one that's identified. That's easy. Almost always there's a problem behind the problem that's really driving things. Sometimes it's the problem behind the problem behind the problem behind the problem that's driving things, and it's always about people. So while you do an awful lot of math analysis, what you're really trying to do is figure out, there's a language being spoken here. The language of accounting is part of it, the language of interactions and people, but it's always trying to find out what are people trying to do and how could you organize things so that they could be more successful individually and more successful collectively and more successful over time. And if you get that done, you can be damn sure an hour and a half is just finished and we're all leaving to go to the next class and do the same thing all over again with another cockamamie problem that is going to gather your attention. You wonder how the dickens we're going to figure this one out. But looking ahead at things, trying to anticipate things, and always remembering it's all about people, all about people, all about people, every single time.
Down to the people.
Yeah.
Down to the people. So you're having lunch with a friend of yours, and he tells you that his father's friend, a fellow named Robert Strange, is at Rockefeller, and he's looking for an MBA, and you should apply to it. And what was your thought in terms of what you were getting into, and how did you end up at the Rockefeller family office?
Well, WGBH was obviously not for profit, and I thought, maybe this is a great idea because the Rockefeller Foundation would be kind of interesting. And so I thought, well, I should certainly talk with this guy. But so my friend was a sensible person and had good judgment. And I thought, if he's recommending I do this, it's probably a pretty damn good idea. So give it a try. And halfway through the interview with Bob Strange, I realized he's not talking about the foundation. In fact, he doesn't work at the foundation. But I got to find out what he really, really does, because I like this man. He's obviously brilliant, and he's very warm and empathic. And I think I knew I needed to learn a lot. I knew I was green and wet behind the ears. So that was not a problem for me. I knew I was an innocent babe. And I thought, if I work with this man, I could learn an awful lot, but I better figure out what he's doing.
Hello, I'm Andrew Lowe, and welcome to the Perfect Portfolio Project. Today, I have the great pleasure and honor of interviewing Professor Robert C. Merton of the MIT Sloan School of Management, the winner of the 1997 Nobel Prize in Economics for his work on derivative pricing theory. Bob, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be here.
So Bob, there's been a lot written, of course, already about the derivatives pricing model that you and Fisher Black and Myron Scholes developed. So if you don't mind, I'm not going to ask you about that today. I'd like to focus on a different part of your research portfolio, which is your work on the application of continuous time stochastic optimization methods to individual savings and retirement decisions. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in that? I want to bring you all the way back to when you were an undergrad and a graduate student in, of all things, applied math. So can you tell us your career path and how you got to this area of research?
I won't take you back to I was born on a farm or something, no. I always loved mathematics, but I always loved mathematics for its applications, not pure math. And so as an undergraduate, I had a major in engineering mathematics, and then I did a graduate degree at that was at Columbia, and at Caltech I did worked on a PhD for in applied math. And after I finished everything except my thesis, I decided that the thesis I wanted to work on had to be somewhere else. So
now, before you tell us about that, how did you come to that decision? Because obviously, that's already a fairly extensive commitment.
Well, but look, I love solving problems, and I liked engineering type things. I thought I was going to be an auto engineer, worked at Ford in advanced vehicle design and so forth. But mathematics was always, it's a powerful tool. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was beautifully elegant how you could use it. And so, that's why I did it.
Now, you were no stranger to financial markets by then, were you?
Well, no.
So can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, I bought my first share of stock when I was 10 years old.
10 years old?
Yeah, maybe 11. I'd have to look the year up, but it was General Motors, and it was I was a car guy, and it was late 54, early 1955.
Okay.
So I knew something about the stock market, and in fact, by the time I used to go to brokerage houses, and as a relative kid, and people who were there sitting around, sort of adopted me. So that was the days before Quotrons or anything electronic. So you just had a tape and you read the tape. So I had that kind of experience in financial markets.
So you weren't just a math geek, you were also a finance geek as well.
Yeah, I liked the markets. I liked things. I thought I understood things. I learned later I didn't know what I was really doing, but that was okay, because it was a very important experience for me besides being enjoyable, and that was I really understood how markets worked in the sense of practice. Mm-hmm. And that had later on a very important positive for my research.
Right. So by the time you got to Caltech, you were studying applied math as a graduate student. You already had a fair amount of financial experience. What ultimately drove you to decide to apply to MIT?
It was so much the financial experience, but I was thinking about my thesis, and I had done everything else. And water waves in the tank didn't do it for me, nor did plasma physics. And I found myself, I was getting up every morning because I was in California. I was trading at 6:30 in the morning, 9:30 in New York when the markets opened. Wow. And I was trading convertible bonds and warrants, over-the-counter options, whatever, even cocoa. And but I never thought of that as a day job, or, I thought it was that the kind of thing you did after.
And did you apply mathematics to that trading, or is that purely seat of the pants?
I built some Fortran models to help me.
You did?
Yeah, but anyway.
Okay.
So no, I took an analytical approach.
Okay.
And then, but what really turned me on is I said to myself, I seem to have some kind of knack for understanding this sort of thing, and because I do it, it must be something I like. And right about that time, two things that caused me to make this crazy change, what everybody else thought was crazy change of fields at that stage, which was, one was that Walter Heller, who was the head of the Council of Economic Advisors, made some announcements to say we have really solved the big macro problems of hyperinflation or bad inflation and deep unemployment, recession, or even depression. And now it's just going to be, we got rid of all those important big risks, and it was just going to be fine-tuning from now on. And I thought about it, I said, that's amazing. Imagine if you could do just a little something in that area, you affect the lives of millions of people in a favorable way. And that's kind of a kick. And then I went to the Caltech bookstore, and I knew nothing about economics formally in the sense of being trained. And I took out a book on I bought a book on mathematical economics. I won't tell you who the authors were, but it turned out to be a pretty awful book, but I didn't know that. But it was important, I think, that it was an awful book, because here this kid read it and said, maybe I can do something.
Okay.
Anyway, I up and decided to apply to economics departments, and I did, and fortunately I got into MIT, and they were even kind enough to fully fund me. And that's how I got into it.
All right, so you started at MIT, and I believe that you begin working right away with Paul Samuelson, or no?
Okay, well, I showed up. I won't bore you with the story of that. Of all the schools I applied to, MIT was the only one that admitted me.
Okay.
But it gave me full money. And since it was number 1 or 2 department, it was an easy decision. So when I showed up, I was rather concerned. I said to the advisor, I looked in the book and you put economic history, micro, macro, all the proper things. And I remember him looking at me and saying, if you take these courses, you're going to be so bored you'll leave after 1 semester. Go down and take Paul Samuelson's mathematical economics course. And I said, well, Professor, it's a 2nd-year course. I just arrived. I've never had any economics, as you're probably aware from it. He said, doesn't matter. Go take it. You'll be fine.
Wow.
So I did. And I went down and I took the course. And it wasn't mathematical economics. And by the way, I had on one side of me Stanley Fisher, and on the other side Michael Rothschild. And we became
Pretty good classmates.
co-authors. They were a year ahead of me, but they were. So I took his class and actually learned my economics formally backwards, in the sense I started with his foundations book. And then they were doing things like intertemporal optimization. Growth theory was very popular at that time, in fact, the math was just fine for me, but it helped me to learn. And I was having a blast with it, because I just loved the problems. And so I did all of that, and at some point, Paul came to me with some tattered yellow sheets of paper. He was writing something on Hamiltonian mathematics applied to growth theory, or I don't know what it is, and said, would I read it over? Not for the economics, of course, but would I just check it over? So as much as a 20-something graduate student could do with Paul Samuelson, I said, I didn't say you're crazy. I said, of course. And then I nonchalantly left, and I went home, and as you can do when you're in your 20s, I pulled an all-nighter going through over and over